Hello everyone, this is Dalster and welcome to another video. Today I wanted to do my review of the latest Dark Side of the Ring episode, Season 4, Episode 1. In case you don't know, I am also a wrestling fan, most notably for WWE. I don't watch the current product right now as much as I do the pay-per-views, but I just mostly look at the pay-per-views once in a while. I grew up watching wrestling with my brothers when I was younger, and when watching Dark Side of the Ring, it made me feel closer to the personal lives of wrestlers that I've never heard nor seen before. I really like this show as it makes us know more about what wrestlers go through, good or bad, and how they're just like us, only they put their body on the line to entertain us. I recommend if you love watching wrestling, whether it's WWE, AEW, or ECW, I would honestly watch Dark Side of the Ring. It's available with a Hulu subscription if you have Hulu. I did do a video of Brian Pillman if you want to check it out. I'll have it linked in the description box down below. Today's episode focuses on the lives of Chris Candido and Tammy, aka Sunny. I don't know anything about Chris Candido, but I do know Sunny. I know she was a valet for the Road Warriors in the late 1990s and moved to WCW shortly after. She got inducted in the WWE Hall of Fame in 2011 but sadly sold her ring to get money. Unfortunately, like China, she had her demons and ran over someone recently while drunk driving. She's been using drugs and alcohol for a long time, and as of now, might be in jail for 27 years due to manslaughter. In this episode, we get a look at Chris's room full of wrestling pages, wrestling articles, and wrestling drawings all over the walls. His younger brother Johnny and his mother Peggy Ray were interviewed about Chris's childhood, and they said Chris was very passionate about wrestling. He even made a custom belt to look like the wrestling title, I guess on TV, at the age of 13. Chris loved wrestling so much he made his own wrestling business called the Eastern Kids Federation, which is probably like a kid's game in a way. His mother Peggy Ray was not okay with Chris wrestling as she wanted him to have a better job, so Chris would lie to his mom about sleeping over his friend's house even though he and his friend would go to Brooklyn, New York at night to watch wrestling matches or be in the matches at the Galaxian R. As a child, Chris was called Cook, and eventually his mom gave in and saw one of his matches in Madison, New York. While Chris wrestled in Madison, he meets Tammy, who we all know as Sunny. Tammy was a beautiful woman that the audience and Chris's mom were mesmerized by her beauty. Peggy Ray said Tammy looked angelic while she wore a white dress. Chris also thought she was pretty and dated Tammy after he ditched his prom date in order to be with Tammy. Definitely not a good way to treat a woman by ditching her for prom last minute though, by the way. After finishing high school, Chris called wrestling promotions and sent videos to begin his wrestling career. Chris even called Jim Cornette, who was in charge of Smoky Mountain Wrestling at the time, and got a job there. But Cornette was not able to pay Chris enough. Chris brought in Tammy and Jim saw potential in her. So he decided to have Tammy be Chris's manager so Chris can get paid a little bit more. Chris's finisher was Blonde Bombshell, and he wore this little cloth around his head, like the ones babies used. And he and Tammy got a lot of attention for being heels. Although he got accepted at the University of Tennessee, Chris rejected it since he and Tammy were becoming successful in the wrestling business. Tammy wanted to be a doctor and even got into medical school, but she got a lot of attention in the wrestling business, so she stayed there. Jim thought it was a good idea for Chris and Tammy to have a gimmick revolving around Bill and Hillary Clinton, because in Tennessee, where Smoky Mountain Wrestling was, Tennessee was known as a Republican state in the 90s. The state of Tennessee hated them, but got Chris and Tammy over, which in wrestling terms means more popularity. Tammy had a lot of hate for it, but she did not seem to care as she was playing a character who idolized Hillary Clinton and filed a lawsuit against Smoky Mountain Wrestling. It was a character, so I don't think she really filed that lawsuit. In 1995, Chris and Tammy signed to WWF, now known as WWE today. It was Chris's dream to be in the company. They were known as the Body Donnas, named Skip and Sunny. They were playing fitness gurus and won the tag team championship belts. At the time in the early 90s, WWF had a lot of weird gimmicks for wrestlers such as the 1-2-3 Kid and Triple H dressing all elegantly as he was known as Hunter Hearst Helmsley. A lot of fans did not like the guru gimmick, and the Body Donnas had Tom Pritchard Chris's old tag team partner, be a fan of them. Even managed to shave off all of Tom's hair. Tammy became more popular and was considered a sex symbol at the age of 24. She became the most downloaded person through AOL, an old search engine in the 1990s. The more popular Tammy got, the more her ego started getting the best of her. Tom said Tammy was not a nice person, as she appears to be on the outside. Tammy was very rude in the locker room and got together with Shawn Michaels because he was very popular in the 90s. The problem with that is she was still with Chris. Terry Runnels says that Tammy wanted to be loved by the top guy. Shawn in the 90s got away with a lot during that time, since he was Vince's boy. Chris could have done something, but because Shawn was a top star at the time, Chris did not want to destroy his own dream and get fired. So he had to suck it up, unfortunately. Poor guy, though. Sadly, Chris got put a mid-carder after a neck injury in Madison Square Garden. He and Tammy started having problems as they had been together for 7 years. One time, they had a big confrontation, and Chris's brother Johnny tried to stop the fight. But Chris decided to go back to Tammy since Chris thought he was the one that brought Tammy into the business. As Chris worked with a neck injury, he was given painkillers but abused them later on. Chris was not liked in the locker room, so he leaves due to being a mid-carder and goes to ECW. He went over with the fans because Chris reminded them of old wrestling because he was fast and strong. Chris got more injuries. With more injuries, it meant taking more opioids and somas. He got addicted to them, and he used the somas to treat his injuries because they were a muscle relaxer type of drug. A lot of wrestlers used somas in the 90s and early 2000s. If you take 6 or 7, it gets you in a drunk, euphoric state. Chris unfortunately fell into addiction. A doctor thought Chris got into a car accident because of how bad his back was, but Chris messed it up due to wrestling. Tammy came to ECW soon after and became Chris's manager as she was being overshadowed by Sable in WWF, who was considered one of the most beautiful ladies in the late 1990s too. Sadly, her drug use was getting worse as there were episodes in ECW where she was seen tumbling, drunk, and unable to hold posture. The audience was not happy with Tammy and booed at her. At parties, Tammy would take somas to please people at the parties, but her career and Chris's tanked during their days at ECW. One story made things worse as Tammy became exploited. Paul Heyman thought it was a good idea for Tammy to do a tell-all video about her drug use and how she's handling it as a way to keep her job. A lot of people did not like that, as it was embarrassing and sad that her addiction was being displayed for people to judge since it was her own struggle. I can't believe Paul Heyman hasn't been canceled for that too. Jim Cornette thought it was disheartening, but I thought it was exploitive. Tammy did not make things any easier for Chris as she hooked up with some of the men or flirted with them as Chris was wrestling. Their relationship got violent domestically to the point where Tammy had knives to protect herself from Chris. Although the drugs were a big impact on their career, Chris and Tammy were still paid on ECW while in suspension by doing office work such as booking hotels. The problem was that ECW was going in debt, which caused Chris and Tammy to end up in debt of $10,000, and they ended up losing their homes. Chris's drug use got worse, and he had got a seizure when he and his brother went to a corrupted pharmacy to get somas. Blood ended up coming out of his mouth. He survived and went back to work by going to Puerto Rico to join a wrestling promotion with Tammy. Puerto Rico at the time treated wrestlers badly, as Tammy said that the people in Puerto Rico would throw batteries at her, and people would get sodas to use the cups to pee and put the urine over people's heads. While they were in Puerto Rico, it was an easy way to get somas. After leaving Puerto Rico, Chris decided to get clean afterwards and joins Total Nonstop Action Wrestling, TNA, in his 30s. Unfortunately, Chris broke his shin in a match at TNA, causing him to not move that day. He had to go through many ankle surgeries, but came back to TNA for a special appearance. A couple days later, Chris calls his mom to tell her that he feels very sick after taking a flight. Chris was immediately rushed to the hospital the following morning. Johnny goes to see Chris, but Chris can barely wake up and his blood stops flowing. Chris died while holding Johnny's hand. While talking about the time Chris passed away, the interviewers, meaning Chris's friends and family, got really emotional talking about his passing. Lance Cade, Johnny, Tom, and surprisingly Jim Cornette got really emotional talking about the day Chris died. Back to the hospital story, the doctor tells Tammy that Chris was gone after they found a blood clot. I think after Chris died, Tammy got more worse than before. At the beginning of this episode, Tammy said that by 36 she would die so she could be like Marilyn Monroe. Terry Runnels says that Tammy told her that Tammy has no regrets for everything that she has done in the past. She also said that the last time she talked to Tammy was after Tammy just got out of jail. Tammy had 7 DUIs over the years and went to jail a couple times. A couple months later, she ran over a 75-year-old man and sadly he died. Tammy is charged with manslaughter and might face up to 27 years in prison. She has been unlicensed for a long time when she ran over this innocent man. It was an interesting but sad episode as I got to know more about Chris Candido and what kind of a person he was. His relationship with Tammy was very toxic and it led to him doing drugs and dying too soon. Chris's mom looked remorseful as she wished that she could have been there for Chris on his recent surgery before he passed away. Blood clots are no joke, as flying while having one is very risky. He seemed to have a really big interest in wrestling when they showed his room. I would give it a 10 out of 10 episode. As for Tammy, I wonder why she became so toxic when she met Chris. It's like she enjoys being mean and egoistical. I hope she stays in jail for a long time or at least gets some serious help because what she did to that 75-year-old man was so messed up. And the final straw. I also heard a rumor that she said some racist things a couple months ago, but it could be that she was on drugs or something. My condolences to his brother Johnny, his mom Peggy, and anyone else who misses or was impacted by Chris's death. I hope that they're doing okay and having a okay life right now. I hope Chris is in a better and safer place, whether it's the afterlife or heaven. Chris may be gone, but I hope his legacy and fond of wrestling lives on forever. Anyway, this is Dalster, and comment below if you want me to do another Dark Side of the Ring episode. I really enjoy watching Vice's shows and all they do. I also want to apologize for doing this episode so late since I just got a job recently, but we'll try to post when I can. Thank you guys for watching, and I hope you guys enjoyed the video. Comment, like, subscribe if you want, and take care of yourself, and I'll do the same. Bye guys.